Namaste everyone. I, JVN Khushboo Jangid, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Management and Commerce at Jayoti Vidyapeeth Women's University, Jaipur. Today, we are going to further discuss the topic ratio analysis. First, we are going to revise a bit. Ratio analysis is divided into two parts. First is structural classification and second is functional classification. Structural classification is divided into three parts. First is balance sheet ratio, second is P&L ratios, third is combined ratios. Functional classification is further divided into five parts. First is liquidity ratios, second is activity ratios, third is profitability ratios, fourth is capital structure or leverage ratios, fifth is investment analysis ratio. Now the structural classification, liquidity ratios and activity ratios and profitability ratios we have already discussed in our previous videos. In this video, we are going to discuss capital structure or leverage ratios. Leverage ratios basically are calculated to judge the long-term solvency of or financial position of the firm. That means financial position किसी भी फर्म या ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की इन लॉन्ग टर्म कैसी रहेगी, सॉल्वेंट और इट विल बी सॉल्वेंट और नॉट सॉल्वेंट, वो जज करने के लिए ये रेशियो कैलकुलेट किया जाता है. इसीलिए इस रेशियो को लॉन्ग टर्म सॉल्वेंसी रेशियो भी कहा जाता है. दिस रेशियो focuses on company's long-term solvency in terms of how much capital comes from debt or measuring the company's capacity to satisfy its financial obligations. That means company की long term में जो debts होंगे और जो obligations होंगी उन्हें पे करने की capacity को measure करने के लिए. Now this ratio is further divided into 7 parts. First is debt equity ratio, second is proprietary ratio, third is solvency or debt to total assets ratio, fourth is fixed assets to net worth ratio, fifth is capital gearing ratio, sixth is interest coverage or debt service ratio, seventh is dividend ratio. First, we will discuss debt equity ratio. Basically, here in this ratio, the relation between debt and equity is measured. This ratio indicates the relative proportion of debt and equity of the organization. In other words, it shows the relation between internal and external sources of funds of the firm. That is why it is also called external-internal equity ratio. The formula to calculate debt equity ratio is total debt divided by shareholders' fund or net worth. It has two other formulas also. Debt equity ratio is external equities divided by internal equities, or we can calculate it by the third formula, that is long-term debt or net worth. External equities are here means total outside liabilities which includes short-term and long-term loans. Internal equity here means total paid up amount of equity and preference shares capital. It includes reserves and surplus also. Now let's understand this ratio with the help of an example. One question is given here which says you have to calculate debt equity ratio from the following information. The information given is equity share capital is of 1 lakh rupees, preference share capital is of 50,000, general reserves amounts to 45,000, profit and loss balance shows 30,000, 10% debentures amounts to 75,000, current liabilities 50,000 and preliminary expenses 10,000. Now to calculate debt equity ratio, first we have to apply the formula, and the formula is total debt divided by shareholders fund or net worth. Two components are important to calculate this ratio. First is total debt. To calculate total debt, we have to take debentures and current liabilities. Debentures are of 75,000 and current liabilities are of 50,000. In the question, no other liabilities is given here which can be included in this. So the total debt of the organization is 1,25,000. Now let's calculate the other component of this ratio, that is shareholder fund or net worth. To calculate shareholder fund, we include equity share, preference share, general reserves and profit and loss amount. When we'll add all these amounts, we'll get the answer 2,25,000. Out of this, we have to exclude preliminary expenses, that amounts to 10,000. When we'll subtract, we'll get the amount 2,15,000. We can apply the other formula also, that is long-term debt divided by net worth. 75,000 divided by 2,15,000, the answer will be 0.35:1. Now we will understand what these ratio means for the organization. If the debt equity ratio is low, that means it provides sufficient safety margin to creditors due to high stake of owners in the capital of the company. Basically लो डेट इक्विटी रेशियो का मतलब है ओनर्स स्टेक, ओनर्स का शेयर ज़्यादा है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एंड क्रेडिटर्स का stake is less. So basically the risk is not that high. Risk level is also low. But when the debt equity ratio is high debt equity ratio shows that the claims of creditors are greater than the owners. So basically it means the situation is risky. Normally the debt equity ratio normally ideal debt equity ratio is 1:1. Next we will do proprietary ratio. This ratio is also called net worth to total asset ratio. It establishes relation between proprietary or shareholders fund and total asset of the business. Proprietary ratio, the formula to calculate proprietary ratio is proprietary fund divided by total assets. Two components are required to calculate this ratio. First is proprietary fund. Now let's talk about what is proprietary fund. share capital and all the reserves and surpluses, undistributed profits, these all are included in proprietary fund. Total assets, we all know. Now let's understand this ratio with the help of an example. XYZ Private Limited is the organization whose shareholders' funds are of 2,50,000 and total assets of 5 lakh. Total assets are of 5 lakh. Now, with the help of this information, we have to calculate proprietary ratio. The formula to calculate proprietary ratio is proprietary funds divided by total assets. Proprietary funds we do not have to calculate because it is already given in the question. The amount is 2,50,000 and the total assets also we do not have to calculate anything. It is directly given in the question. That is 5 lakh. So we just have to divide these two numbers and we'll get our answer. 2,50,000 divided by 5 lakh is equals to 0.5. Now this proprietary ratio can also be further classified into two parts. First is ratio of fixed assets to proprietary fund, and the next is ratio of current assets to proprietary fund. एक में हम फिक्स्ड असेट्स और प्रोपराइटर्स फंड्स का रेशियो निकालते हैं, उनके बीच का रिलेशन कैलकुलेट करेंगे, एंड इन द सेकंड वन हम करंट असेट्स टू प्रोपराइटर्स फंड कैलकुलेट करेंगे. इससे पहले जो फॉर्मूला वी हैव डन दैट वाज प्रोपराइटरी फंड्स टू टोटल असेट्स लिया था. नेक्स्ट इट कैन बी फर्दर डिवाइडेड इनटू फिक्स्ड असेट्स आल्सो एंड करंट असेट्स आल्सो. फर्स्ट we will discuss ratio to fixed assets to proprietary fund. This ratio establishes the relation between fixed assets and proprietors fund or shareholders fund. The formula to calculate this ratio is fixed assets divided by proprietors fund. From these fixed assets, we have to subtract depreciation. Next is ratio of current assets to proprietors fund. This ratio establishes the relation between current assets and proprietors or shareholders fund. This after depreciation is basically a mistake. There is no depreciation on current assets. So the formula to calculate this ratio is current assets divided by proprietary fund. The only difference between these three ratios is in the first one we will take total assets. We will consider total assets. In these two, in the second one we will take fixed assets only. Current assets will not be included in this ratio. And in the third one ratio, only current assets will be considered. Fixed assets will not be considered. These were the three proprietary ratios. In this video, basically we have covered two ratios: debt equity ratio and proprietary ratio. Now 5 more ratios are remaining. solvency or debt to total assets ratio, fixed assets to net worth, capital gearing, interest coverage or debt service ratio, and dividend coverage ratio. These all ratios we will discuss in the next video. Thank you.